What's up to all my students in the Spiritual Ecology Course out there? It's your boy Ian from the litunderground.com here today to drop another lesson. So first of all, for all the first-time viewers or listeners out there, I would go to the link in the description below to watch the introduction video and read about the course outline and whatnot, and you can see if this is the right fit for you. Or you can just tag along and see what this episode is about. But I would like to apologize to everybody, though, because the last 5 or 6 episodes have had bad audio quality. And I'm sorry, and you may not have noticed it, but I was just wearing my headphones today, rewatching one of the videos I was uploading, and there was this grainy sound in there. And then I watched a couple more videos, and all of them had grainy sound, and I realized I was using a bad cord to hook up my microphone. So I'm so sorry, you guys, and I would re-upload them, but it's like 3 hours worth of content. So, really just going to kind of push forward, especially, being that I have, 500 subscribers at the time of this recording. Thank you, everybody, for 500 subscribers, too. We're at 500, going for 1,000 now. So not the most imperative thing at the moment, but I feel bad maybe for the people in the future because we're going to have 1 million one day, baby. But this chapter is kind of cool because I think Abrams, and today we're talking about the speech of things in David Abram's book, Becoming Animal. And I'm trying to going to keep this more personal today because David has this experience with a humpback whale and a sea lion. And he talks about how he used language to be able to connect with them. And he says, quote, "It was rather as if my body itself was doing the thinking, trading vocal utterances and physical expressions back and forth with those smooth-skinned and sentient creatures." And I can pull up the full quote right here for you guys to read. And that has been my experiences with coyotes out in the desert. And I am out in the desert every single day doing my thing and hiking, writing, doing yoga, chilling, dying of dehydration. And I see coyotes all the time, probably at least once a week. And most of the time they're within 25 to 50 feet of me. And I can get that close because they know who I am. And what David recommends, first of all, is speaking to them in your natural tone. I do that all the time. And that's how I think they know who I am. Because 1, they know that I'm not a threat. And 2, eventually, when they start running away, I chase them. And they don't get scared because they know I can't catch them. So I chase them for a while, and they start acting like dogs. It's actually kind of cool. Because they know, they're like, who is this guy? And I start yelling out, like, yippee! I start, like, doing yips and stuff at them also. And they know, like, wow, this guy's a pretty chill guy. And like I said, if I see a certain family once a week or a certain group I'm mostly in the same area, they've started to recognize me and really not give a damn about what I'm doing. None of them ever get scared of me anymore. And then if a pair does or a group does, then I'll probably see them once again. So this is something that you can employ with. So first he says, embody your primal body. When you're out there with an animal and you want to speak its language, just embody its primal body. And then maybe say something or let out like a certain noise or a song or a tone. I've done that before too. And they're going to hear in your voice. Because, for instance, and people talk really weird to animals, but pretend I came up to you and pretend your name's like Samantha. And I'm like, "Oh, Samantha, how are you doing? Hey, oh my God." If I did that to you and I was like a random person, you'd be like, "Who? Oh my God." You'd be like really flustered. But I was like, hey, Samantha, what's going on? How you doing? Probably a little bit more mellow. And that's the same thing with animals. We have this different reaction and think that if we act a certain type of way that they're going to have a different type of reaction. And they actually are going to. But if we speak to them in our normal, relaxed posture and with our normal energy, then we're going to unlock something with them that I would say is a pretty cool thing. And you probably have experienced it before. I've done it with deer and elk. I've done this before with a moose like David describes. What else? You can do this with stray dogs that are chasing you on a bicycle. It's endless. Or even animals that you meet for the first time, like a dog or something that's maybe not the most, or cat that's not the most social creature. But, remember with cats, slow blink and let them smell you. So beautiful coyote shots. And so then we get to this section about, okay, so let's read one more quote. Everybody quote. It follows that the myriad things are also listening or attending to various signs and gestures around them. Indeed, when we are at ease in our animal flesh, we will sometimes feel that we are being listened to or sensed by the earthly surroundings. And so we take deeper care with our speaking, mindful that our sounds may carry more than a merely human meaning and resonance. This care, this full-bodied alertness, is the ancient ancestral source of all word magic. It is the practice of attention to the uncanny power that lives in our spoken phrases to touch and sometimes transform the tenor of the world's unfolding. And words have power, and that's like something that is a part of the personal development and even spirituality world, and this is the Spiritual Ecology Course, that our words carry a certain resonance. And as David talks about in this chapter, actually words and language separate us from nature. And he talks about certain people who live out in the woods or are very natural people. They don't talk very much. I'm sure you have been that person before when someone is a little bit more in the rural environment where you talk for 3 minutes, you're like, wow, they don't really care. I'm just ranting to this person. And when they talk, it's very distinct and to the point. So I guess we're not going to get into that in this episode, but shout out we're going to talk about green language, or it's sometimes called the language of the birds, in the next video. So I would recommend checking that out because it's one of the coolest concepts in language. But you're talking about the speech of things, though, not the language of things, because language is not limited to just us. That is one of the things that we mess up here, is that language is available to all sensible phenomena. We've already talked about this with mountains and with houses and with stones, how there's this co-creative relationship happening with those things, but we don't open ourselves up to that enough. So also another thing that we can do here that I thought was also a great recommendation is talk to the small things. Talk to the small things in our life, like the plants, the rocks, even the wind, the day, and talk to it in that neutral way. And I think that you're going to get a lot out of that experience. So now we're going to talk about prayer, everybody, and what the prayer has to do with this. And man, I mean, this is just kind of cringe, these photos, but quote, prayer in its most ancient and elemental sense consists simply in speaking to things, to a maple grove, to a flock of crows, to the rising wind, rather than merely about things. As such, prayer is an everyday practice common to oral indigenous peoples over the world over. And that is true. But we have somehow gotten into this prayer like Jesus and Christianity and all the monotheistic religions and even polytheistic religions that are very structured. And we've lost the essence that indigenous people knew, that we have forgotten about through the alphabet, through language. And what this talking, this dialogue, and I'm being serious here. You might look crazy, you might feel crazy, but you have to, this is what we're going to be talking about in the field work. You have to talk in the world, man. You have to speak to animals and to things, and you can't hold yourself back. You have to really feel into it, but not separate from it. Like I said, don't make voices, don't plead weird things. What if someone came up to you and you're like, oh my God, nature, thank you so much for being so beautiful, and I really want to have a good day, or I really want this job, like, could you please help me out? I think if you said that to someone you'd only met a couple times, as a friend, as a person who in their own space, they'd kind of have a weird reaction. And I don't want to ascribe human personality to this, but I actually think it's effective to be in the most relaxed, calm state you can be when you're doing this. And I think you're going to get more results. And here's another quote. Prayer experiences a sensible world as a source of itself. And that's the Christian prayer. Or, this is the right. This is prayer in nature. Experiences a sensible world as a source of itself, as a kind of ongoing transcendence wherein each sensible thing is steadily bodying forth its own active creativity and that's what it's about, man. It's what we've talked about with Plato and with the fall of the universe, as you guys have been reading, with Copernicus or whatever his name is, the illusion, the mystery that nature has for us is available to us, and it can happen through prayers and main things that we are talking about in that section. So a couple more thoughts before we get into the conclusion of this is that I would really recommend everybody read the book, The Alphabet and the Goddess. And that really explains in a really nice way about how the alphabet is patriarchal, how monotheistic religions are patriarchal. And one of my favorite examples is art. When you look at Western art and its depictions of nature, it's either a part of a landscape and in the background, and sometimes there's pure landscape photos, but there's always something weird happening. But if you look at the Chinese landscape photos, you see like a town, or you see this crazy painting of nature. Then there's this really minuscule like house or man walking, and it shows how much larger nature is than us. And it's like, if you look at the scaling, if you're like actually being technical about the art, the scaling really, their scaling is off, but they're trying to make a point, almost like a surreal point, that nature is so much larger and grander than us. And it should be the core of a Chinese painting, at least in that the wilderness and rivers tradition of poets and painters. So let's talk about a couple of revelations from the alphabet and the goddess, though, is because 99% of language is not this type of language, everybody. It's not creative language. It is business language, the language that we use in jobs. Think about the world out there. Most of those things, most of the writing that's happening in the world is very just like clerical or administrative. And it's been like that forever, especially back in the day. Writing was used to send a letter or to send a business transaction or to be using it to calculate and do your books or, you know, things of that nature. And as we've seen throughout history, and this is a generalization, not a fact, that men excel a little bit more with getting crazy with business and stuff. And maybe it's because men were just put in that position because we came out of evolution as the dominant physical presence and, you know, held on to that. So we held on to the business, the money side of everything. That could be it too. But as this book kind of, I would say, proves, if not shows, that men have more of a predilection toward that type of language and women have more of a predilection toward creative language and hieroglyphs and photos and calligraphy. And that's why actually, if you look at Asian societies, there's actually been some really, and not even just any society with hieroglyphs, women are actually treated better, and maybe not, you know, the bounding of the feet and stuff, but, you know, in general, he shows in this book that women are treated better than men in societies without the alphabet. And what the alphabet brought us, though, as Abram says, is, and monotheism is the cold inquiry that is required to create all the stuff right here. That detachment that we were talking about with the scientists to create the computers and the houses and whatever medical technology. That's what was given to us through this cold inquiry. But that cold inquiry, and like I said, where the problem starts is when people do it for 8 hours a day, and that can be hard on the body. But then they come home, they live their whole life with that cold inquiry. They never separate out of that, and that's what we have to stop and try to prevent. Is that people are going to have to continue to do these jobs probably forever. But when they get home, man, we can't keep reinforcing that with more atheism and with more detachment and cynicism and drugs and prescription drugs and bad sex. Like, they have to open themselves up to this new world and not live there all the time. Because what's the point? You actually don't get anything. I get at your job, you get something. And in the world, I guess moving through, if you make these rational. But like I said, if you're making a decision, like an actual business or like whatever decision, maybe you shouldn't be using your emotions, for instance. So that cold form of inquiry, though, like I said, should be able to be solved through just having a general life. And it's kind of crazy, but I think that other than the extreme cases, you'll get better at your chosen art of engineering or at science or computer programming if you have more of a balance in your life with more nature and with more love and laughter and all those other things, because you're going to feel more motivated to work and do more in less time. So check out that book, everybody, The Alphabet and the Goddess. So the last thing one other thing I would like to talk about, then we'll get to the concluding point, which I think is the best point maybe of the book yet, is that writing, and we talked about this, I think, in week 1 or video 1 or 2, is that we need to write in the forms of nature, that we need to study the cat, the ocotillo bush outside my room right now. And we need to write in that form. We can use writing and language as something to connect with nature and to mimic and honor nature and praise nature. Or we can use it as something to distance ourselves from nature. And it's one of these things that we've been given the power and we're not going back. So we might as well utilize it. Because once again, the Luddites and all the people out there always trying to make this about, oh, well, that's why we don't need language and I try to live a simple life and all this stuff. And it's like, all right. But like I said, we've crossed that threshold, at least for a while, at least until all this stuff is solved. And we can go back, I guess, to pastoral living. And I don't even know if we want that or I want that or if anybody wants that. So one of the last cool things that is talked about is about getting inside of our own heads and the silent voice of writing and when that came about. And it's crazy because, paperback books really didn't exist. And he makes the connection that the monotheistic religions and their texts, the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran, all were the first really hardcore written texts. And a lot of those texts, though, didn't have spacing within them. So it was all had to be a lot of it had to be read out loud. And we actually see that in this, like in the Jewish tradition, that they read a lot of like the Torah out loud and memorize it and have to re-speak it out loud. And in all the oral traditions, they have to say everything out loud with spacing, with pauses, with dramatizations. But with the advent of spacing, I guess by 7th century monks in, more common Western languages, suddenly that separation happened and we could read books in silence and get way more information out. Way more information. We could do it on like a quantum level and be reading a couple books a day, even if you were like a monk who just read all day. And that's what's starting to happen to us now, is that the voice inside of our heads has vanished because, people don't really know this, but until the early 1900s, early 20th century, paperback books weren't available to most of the people in the world. If we're talking about classes, most of the people in the world just started getting access to books at that point, and thus becoming literate, and then being able to access that silent voice. So we were thrust into a world where now we are reading, and have to live in capitalism and after the Industrial Revolution. And now with technology and with wars, all these different things reinforce that nature isn't important, that it doesn't matter, that science and technology is the new kid on the block, that it's the new gods. And that has created, I think, actually even remnants of schizophrenia and stuff in our brain that we can't get out of this voice. The chatterbox keeps continuing. And it blew my mind that people hundreds of years ago maybe necessarily didn't have that chatterbox because they didn't understand the concept of the silent voice as much. They didn't have that high-strung, high-speed voice. Maybe they had one, but it wasn't as coherent and as lucid as this one is. And as readers, I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys probably have that chatterbox. And that's why I'm going to be releasing, that's why I'm doing my Yoga for Authors stuff, because I really want to help you guys reduce that chatterbox. So that is all, everybody, for the day. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.